Now. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah McAnulty. I run the Skype a Scientist program, and I'm so excited that you're all here today to talk about cold oceans with our scientist for the day that's going to be sharing all of her knowledge with us, Maya Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us, Maya.
Thank you.
Of course. Okay, so the way this works is going to be about 45 minutes long. And all of the information after our little introduction is going to be determined by your questions. So if you have questions, please submit them to the Q&A. Over the course of the next 40 minutes, I will be asking Maya your questions, and then she'll answer them. This is all about Q&A. But before we launch into the Q&A, Maya, would you like to tell us who you are, what you do, and why you like it?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. It's nice to kind of see all of you. My name is Maya Thomas. I'm currently a third-year PhD student at the Virginia Institute of Marine Science here in Virginia. So as a PhD student, I currently study zooplankton. These are small animals that can't swim against a current, and particularly I do that in Antarctica, which is really fun because I get to go down there and like hang out with all like the penguins there, but also study these animals that I really, really enjoy because they're very important in global cycles. Yeah, that's me. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Great. How much time do you spend in Antarctica in a given year?
It depends. So this year, I actually just got back a couple weeks ago, and I was there since right before Christmas. So I spent 3 months there earlier this year, and then I'm probably going to be going back again in October, November.
Very cool. So from my understanding of how science works in Antarctica, there's a station there where lots of scientists hang out, and that's called McMurdo. Is that where you were sleeping, or were you sleeping on boats? Like, how did this all work?
So that's a great question. There's actually 3 American stations. There's McMurdo, which is the largest one. That's probably the one most people have heard about. There's also South Pole, right at the South Pole. But there's this smaller station called Palmer Station, and that's where I was living for a couple of months. But I also did ship-based work. So yeah, I started my journey on a ship. And then the program I'm a part of, what goes all throughout the Western Antarctic Peninsula. So if you think of Antarctica, there's this part that's closest to the South American continent. That's kind of where we were on the ocean near there. And then after about a month and a half on the ship, I got off at Palmer Station, and I spent another month and a half conducting research from the station itself.
Very cool. So are you going out and collecting the plankton and then bringing them back to the lab to look at them? Like, what are the kinds of day-to-day things that you're doing with those little critters?
Yeah, so I basically do the same thing, ship and station, just kind of on different scales. But yes, we have this really big net that we deploy off the back of the ship, either the large research ship we were on or the smaller like local ship we took around. And yeah, we can just tow the net through the water, and whatever comes up, there'll typically be, there's like a bottle on the end that holds all of the zooplankton. And then what we do is we either keep those zooplankton alive to do experiments on them. Like I do fecal pellet production experiments. So I basically put plankton in a bucket and make them poop, and it's so exciting. Or we count all of the zooplankton that we catch as well. We have to identify and count them. So yeah, basically whatever place we're doing it, we take all these plankton back to the lab. This is either right the door next door if we're on the ship, or we went out to catch the plankton, so we have to bring them back home to our lab. And then we either do experiments on them, or we just count them, and then we preserve them so we can see them for future use.
Very cool. Rhodes Intermediate 5th grade would like to know, why is it important to study zooplankton?
Oh, they're super important. That's a great question. So they are typically smaller animals that you may not think about a lot. Sometimes they're even microscopic, so you can't see them very well or at all with the naked eye. But they, as a whole, zooplankton are very important in this thing called the biological pump. So this is a whole concept that I'll get into, but basically the biological pump is the transfer pathway of surface carbon to depth. So this means humans are putting out a lot of carbon into the atmosphere. That's what's kind of creating climate change. And that carbon needs to go somewhere. It's best if it gets out of the atmosphere. And the oceans, and particularly zooplankton in the oceans, bring that carbon down. So we have like phytoplankton. So I talk about zooplankton, the more animal-like plankton. But there's also phytoplankton, the plant-like plankton. So there will be phytoplankton on the surface of the ocean, and they use the sun's energy and they incorporate some of that atmospheric carbon into themselves. And then zooplankton come along and eat that phytoplankton. And then zooplankton are the mediators of putting that plankton elsewhere. And depending on what happens to that carbon, if that carbon is released from that zooplankton in some way, which could be through poop or pee, there's all kind of stuff I study. And if that material makes it below about 200 meters, there's a chance for that carbon to stay sequestered in the ocean for upwards of hundreds to thousands of years. So this is in the ocean, this is the biggest process of moving carbon that happens on like a daily basis. So zooplankton are the initiators of that whole process, and that's why they're very important.
Awesome. That does sound super duper important. Maddie would like to know, what is a fact about zooplankton that you wish more people knew?
That is a great question. I think one of the fun facts I always tell people is, you might think of plankton as these like small animals, and typically they are, but did you know jellyfish are also zooplankton? Because there's a very broad classification for just any animal that can't swim against a current. So some of these big animals, you think like, oh, that's a big animal, it can swim, right? Not really. They're actually a type of zooplankton.
Wow. Okay, so what's the biggest zooplankton of all of them?
I am not absolutely sure. I would probably say it is a type of jellyfish species, especially once we get into the gelatinous species. That they may not technically be jellyfish, but there's a lot of gelatinous species that can form aggregates. So instead of having they're like basically clones. The whole animal is a clone of itself many, many, many times. And they can form very large structures. So there's this animal called siphonophore that does that. That can create like huge, big animals that also like bioluminesce, so they like glow in the dark. So if you like see that out at sea, they've actually been. We assume that's what some of the old timey like pirate sea monsters, they're actually seeing a big siphonophore at the surface of the ocean, because if you're like in the middle of the ocean, no lights, and then you see a big glowing form in the ocean, you might think it's a sea monster. It's a little scary, but they're also, they're just this one animal cloned many, many, many times, like a huge structure. That's probably one of the biggest zooplankton animals.
Sounds good. For folks who are living on the East Coast and probably also the West Coast, it's just I've spent more time looking over docks in the East Coast. There are siphonophores all over the place. Sometimes they're like a little string of them that look like this big, like the size of like a gum container. And sometimes, particularly like when you get into the Bay Area, so if anybody's spending time this summer on the coast, like just look to see over the dock. If you see little they look like little spaceships kind of. They're really weird looking. They look like about grape sized. They're everywhere. Like you can't look over the dock in the summer in New Jersey without seeing 1 zillion of them.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to mention that I should have mentioned earlier. But yeah, you can find zooplankton anywhere. So I particularly study them in Antarctica. But you can just I'm right on the Chesapeake Bay is outside my door. You can find zooplankton in the Chesapeake Bay. You can find them in any like river, lake, stream, ocean, any like active body of water. You can find zooplankton in. So you just have to. It's just a matter of looking for them.
Yeah, super, super abundant. Awesome. We've got a question from the LEAP program. Is your job a social job? Do you get to talk to a bunch of other scientists and from the day to day?
I think it depends, but I'd like to consider it's a pretty social job. So currently I'm in my office, but I have lab mates that come in. I have the other lab members that I talk to on a daily basis. And especially when I'm out doing field work, there's a whole bunch of people from like all around the world who come together to do these like research cruises. And it's so nice to just be able to see all these people on like a daily basis for a couple of months. And like in general science is very collaborative. So like I'm always on my email, I'm always on like my chat, like talking to people just like for basic questions or more serious, like, oh, let's do like a research project together. It's a very social and like encouraging environment that I like to kind of stay in.
Awesome. Sounds good. We got another question from the LEAP program. Why did you choose to become a marine biologist?
Oh, that's a great question. So I've always loved marine science. I actually grew up in Alabama, so it's kind of landlocked unless you go to like southern Alabama, but I was not in southern Alabama. So getting into marine science was kind of a slower process for me, but I had grandparents who lived on the island of St. Thomas in the US Virgin Islands. And so when we go to visit them, I'd always be like, oh, I want to go to the beach. I want to do something exciting, you know, and like the love of the beach, the love of ocean animals. I was a big dolphin person when I was a kid. That all together made it just like I just love the ocean. And then it took me a while to figure out what I want to do and what kind of like marine science I want to do. Because there's lots of different types of marine science. You know, you can work in an aquarium, you can work with like specific animals, but eventually I found out that like doing research is really what I was passionate about. And then I kind of stumbled my way here.
Awesome. Sounds good. We got a question from Frank. What is the difference between a blue tide and a red tide?
That's a great question. I don't know if I know what a blue tide is actually.
Same.
Okay. Oh my God, I don't want
to. I'm trying to think what a blue tide is, other than like a tide, like a basic, like a tide.
Yeah.
I guess let's just define what a red tide is, and then that might work.
I'm not sure what a blue tide is, to be honest, but I know a red tide is typically what happens when there's a harmful algal bloom at the same time as like a tide is coming in. So these like red tides can be the common name for there's been some biomass explosion of an organism, particularly a phytoplankton, that is usually harmful in some way, either to humans or to like wildlife population that we may feed off of. And it usually causes like detrimental effects on some economical level, either by tourism or through like fisheries. And they're usually not beneficial, and they could last upwards of like weeks to months, depending on what animal is making it. But yeah, if you like ever go around and see, you want to go to the beach and you see there's a red tide alert, that's usually like notice to stay away from the area because it could cause some like health issues.
For sure. Thank you. Our next question is also from the LEAP program. What kinds of equipment do you use? You mentioned that you use a net, a plankton tow, you might call it, for scooping plankton. What else do you use?
Yeah, so we, you know, there are some materials that we use that are very you know, specialized to what we do, but honestly a lot of what we use is pretty like basic hardware equipment. So yeah, we have big nets that it's either 1 meter squared or 2 meter squared is the most common nets we use, or ring nets. And this, you know, this is like the size of me to bigger than me essentially, that we deploy off our ships. And that's specifically the frame is that big, and then the net is even longer to capture all of these plankton that are in the water column. They have a specialized mesh size to capture certain types of plankton. So typically we use zooplankton in Antarctica are typically a little bit bigger. So we use a larger mesh size, but it's still like, you know, kind of barely see through, you know, it's still a pretty fine mesh size we use on our nets. And And then we use microscopes a lot, is because we want to, when we're identifying animals, we might have to take a closer look at them. So we use things like microscopes. We have lots of just hand tools through like really fine movement of our plankton. Forceps are always important for picking them out. And then in general, one of our most like vital pieces of equipment is like a 5-gallon bucket that we got at Lowe's.
I think people underestimate how many scientists are using those 5-gallon buckets.
Yeah,
every day, all the time, for all reasons. They are key.
Like essential part of our science, honestly. We have one net that was kind of makeshift MacGyvered from legitimately a pool, like one of the pool things where you scrape the bottom of your pool. Yeah, exactly. We just have like a pool net that we use. Yeah, there's lots of very specialized equipment, especially on the net. We have specialized equipment where like at the bottom where we collect all of our zooplankton has to be a very specialized kind of bucket thing called a cod end. Around the mouth of the net, we use this thing called a flow meter that is very precise in measuring how much water goes through our net. We clip on top of our net an instrument that measures like the depth that our net goes to keep everything, make sure we're like hitting the target depth, hitting the target amount of water that has gone through our net, that type of stuff. But also on the other side, we just use like buckets and spoons to scoop up zooplankton like really gently. Yeah, so there's lots of different equipment, but they vary on the like official science-y scale.
Yeah. I think there are some scientists who most of the time use like very expensive, very high-tech, fancy equipment. And then there are scientists who are like quick, slap it together with duct tape and popsicle sticks and go for it.
Duct tape is our favorite thing. Absolutely. Yeah.
A lot of making it up as you go. Yeah, particularly for field work. Yeah, in my experience.
Yes, that is also my experience.
Yeah, it's a good time. All right, Alejandro wants to know, what is your favorite type of plankton?
Oh, I love that question. There's a lot of plankton that hold very near and dear to my heart. But I think I'll go with the first plankton I ever studied, by these small animal called copepods. They're typically microscopic. They're very tiny, and they're found everywhere. They are the most abundant. I believe they're the most abundant animal in the world. So you can find them everywhere. But I just love copepods. They're so important. Yeah, and they have these like cool antenna and these long like tails. They're just so cute to me. But I'm usually the only person to say that, but I think everyone should look it up. They're great. They're great boys.
Is Plankton from SpongeBob a copepod?
I think so.
I think so. He looks like a copepod to me.
Right? I've gotten in some Twitter debates. But okay. I fully believe that Plankton is a copepod. So yeah, he's actually a very good representation of a copepod. He has that body, he has these long tentacles. The debate has been on Twitter, at least, that there was once an episode where it looked like he was eating light, like a phytoplankton would do. And so that's been the debate where I'm like, okay, zooplankton they can't just like consume light to get their energy. They have to consume the consumers who consume the light.
Right.
So that's where the debate kind of comes in, but at least the shape of Plankton himself is absolutely a copepod.
The body of a copepod with the superpowers of a zooplankton or a phytoplankton.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
He's an amalgam of many plankton concepts in one.
I think they took some liberties.
Yeah.
But I would say he's a copepod.
Amazing. Great. Garden Spot Middle School wants to know, how big are the boats that you're doing your science in?
Oh, that's a great question. So I have been on 2 ships where I've done like my ship-based research. This is the Lawrence M. Gould and the Nathaniel B. Palmer. These are two large research vessels. They're used for like lots of different types of work. And even the cruise I was on, my group did plankton work. There's other groups that did water work, or we had some like whaling and penguin people so it's really fun to like work with a whole bunch of people who do so many different things. But these are fairly large ships. They're also icebreakers. Since we go to Antarctica, they have to have some sort of ice breaking capability in case you get stuck. But I'm so bad. I think they're about like 300 feet, I would say. And these are ships we like work and live in, and like these are our homes for a month and a half. And then once I get to station and do more local boating around there, I'm on this probably about 15-foot vessel. It's called specifically a rib or rigid hull inflatable boat. So it has really cool specifications that makes it like it does a lot of cool work, and it's kind of it has a hull that could like get up on some islands. We don't do that specifically, but it's been outfitted to do all of these cool plankton work that we do. And that's a bit of a smaller boat, but we also use our smaller nets on that boat, since we can't have a net that's bigger than the boat.
Right. Very cool.
But yeah, so those are the 2 or 3 vessels I've used in the past.
When you go to Antarctica, are you like taking a plane from where you are to somewhere, then take a boat, or are you taking a plane all the way to Antarctica?
I wish I could fly straight to Antarctica. There's definitely some stations that have runways like that. There's a British station near Palmer Station called oh no, I forget the name of it, but they have a runway.
Okay.
And McMurdo has a runway, but Palmer Station does not have a runway, so we take a day essentially flying commercially to the tip of South America, to this place called Punta Arenas, and then we get on a boat there and we go kind of west or east out of the continent of South America, down through this area of the water called the Drake Passage. It's known to be one of the worst seas in the world.
Yeah.
It's always a fun time. It takes about 4 days to get through the Drake. And then finally we make it to the tip of Antarctica, and we kind of start our work a little bit south of the tip of there.
Whoa. So how long is that boat ride total?
Leaving Punta Arenas and getting to leave Punta Arenas, and one of our first stops is usually Palmer Station. That's usually slightly less than a week. Wow. So maybe 5 or 6 days, I believe.
So because the Southern Ocean is just like circling around Antarctica, it's like really rough, right? So
yes.
Does everybody just get seasick? Like how do you handle that?
It's definitely not some of the funnest seas I've ever been in. A lot of people do get seasick, and like it's absolutely okay if you get seasick as a marine scientist. It happens to everyone. So far, I have not gotten seasick, knock on wood. But yeah, they're usually not fun days. Like I typically don't get seasick because I also spend all of my day like in bed and just like kind of rolling with the ship. But yeah, it's not uncommon to like not really see people for the passage.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can get like a beautiful day on the passage. It's like colloquially called Drake Lake, and it will be gorgeous. It'll be flat. It'll be like something you've never seen before. Occasionally people get lucky enough to see that. Unfortunately, usually when I cross the Drake, maybe it's me, there's always some sort of storm. And we're getting like 10-foot waves that are not the funnest, but you have to do it. You kind of sit down and
hunker down and deal with it. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, it's not surprising when people are like, I'm not feeling great, and we're all like, nope, neither am I. Like it's at least a very like you don't have to be like embarrassed to get seasick, because everyone gets seasick at
Everybody's
some point or other.
Not great.
It's never the funnest.
Right. It's like a bonding experience to all get seasick
Yeah,
together.
absolutely. Especially as like, this is like kind of when you first hit it, on your like first trip down. I particularly, when my first trip down, I hit it into like a hurricane essentially. And we had a really interesting couple of days. You know, everyone was in it together, and we'd be
Right.
like, you know, see each other for once a meal, and you're like, "Are you doing well?" And you're like, no, cool, neither am I.
Wow,
We're all
that is
facing it.
one of the like aspects of sometimes being a marine biologist. Other marine biologists will never get on a boat at all. So it's
Yeah,
like there's so many ways to be a marine biologist.
absolutely.
Cool. All right. So Jasper would like to know, if someone wished to become a marine biologist, what steps would you recommend? Is there a specific college or internship that you would recommend?
Yeah, I have lots of recommendations, especially if you're near end of high school, college age. Um, I in high so I did a lot of things. I've known I wanted to marine science, go into marine science for a long time. So I had the luxury of kind of looking at things early. In high school, unfortunately, there's not a lot of experiences, so you have to kind of really hone in. Like you're I think in general, the best advice is to be open to anything, because a lot of things won't be exactly what you want. But you kind of, it'll be good to get your foot in the door and get to know some of these things, so you can kind of pick out what you do and you don't like. When I was in high school, I volunteered at a couple of places, just because I wanted to kind of be near animals. So like local, if you have like a zoo or an aquarium in your area, that's awesome. That's perfect. Or like natural history museum, anything that can get introduce you to some animals or a lab environment. And especially when you get to college, those are really where opportunities kind of open up for you. I didn't go, I went to a college specifically for a degree in marine biology, but I don't, coming to grad school after, I I I wouldn't say it's rare, but it's not uncommon also to have like a degree in anything else. But then they suddenly had an interest in marine science, and they're like, you know what, let me switch pathways. So you don't have to like know like right when you get to college what you want to do.
Yeah,
Um,
totally co-sign.
absolutely. But then once you're in college, you can do a lot of opportunities. There's lots of programs you can volunteer, intern at. I think I participated in what's called an REU program, or research experience for undergrads. I think that was one of the best things I could have done. It was actually what first introduced me to the lab I'm in today. It's typically a program where you get to get experience at a different university for the summer. It's typically also paid for. So for people who like have to, you know, have a job in the summer, it's a great opportunity. And yeah, it typically, you just get to have a new, like it was my first opportunity to really have a good lab experience. So that was really exciting for me. Especially if you're thinking about continuing into grad school, I think it's a really good experience to have. There's also a program called, ooh, there's just, I forgot that name as well. Sorry. But there's a lot of like college programs you can look up, especially sponsored by government agencies, and they usually might be paid and have some sort of scholarship with it. So if you look into National Science Foundation or the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, NSF or NOAA, they have some opportunities for college students. And then looking just like locally at whatever college you're in, looking for labs you might be interested in, or research you might be interested in, and just like talking to those professors directly and being like, hey, do you have some opportunities for people in your lab? And like my lab currently has like a handful of undergrads. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunities, especially after you get to college. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is to kind of be open. You might not find exactly what you want, but you could find something like new, and you might not enjoy it that much, or you might enjoy it a lot. And then I think particularly, I have a particular opinion. I don't know if this is a widespread thing, but especially in marine science, I don't think you should have to pay for opportunities. I've had a couple friends who like they did international opportunities, but they were essentially working for a place and paid them to have that experience. Although I all my friends who did do it had a great time and they really enjoyed what they did. I don't think you should have to pay for stuff like that. And in particular, there's a lot of marine science schools once you get into graduate school that pay you to be a grad student. So if I would look, if you're really interested in continuing marine science and doing like grad school, I also don't think you should pay for grad school because you are doing a lot of work for your lab and like it's going to come with work, but you're also, you know, you should be paid for your time. So they unfortunately are a little bit more infrequent, but there are a lot of opportunities that you also get paid for. So I would look heavily into that before, you know, taking another opportunity.
Completely agreed. You shouldn't have to pay to do a job.
No.
You have to dig a little harder
yeah.
for the paid ones, but yeah, shouldn't be paying for it.
Yeah.
All right. Our next question is from 80. Is it almost always dark in Antarctica?
No, actually, it's almost always light because we go in the summer. So the hemispheres are obviously switched because now Antarctica is in the southern hemisphere. And so when it was, you know, winter here is actually summer down there. So we had almost, I'm a little bit like, if you go to the South Pole, they'll have like absolutely 24 hours of light. I was a little bit higher than that. So I had 23 hours of light. But once I left in kind of mid-March, so we were starting to get some nights, which was actually, that was my first time experiencing night in Antarctica, so it was really weird, honestly. But yeah, now that it's going into spring, or for the southern hemisphere, it's going into fall, and eventually it's going to be winter in a couple of months, then they'll get their 24 hours of darkness, which I've never been at that time of the year, and it sounds a little scary in my opinion.
Seems wild. Yeah, it seems like a weird, disorienting experience. Okay, what is the longest time you've been away from home as a marine biologist?
Okay. So I'm from Alabama. My parents still live in Alabama. So going to grad school in general, I live in Virginia, so it's about 10 hours away from my parents. But I don't get to see them as often as I would like. So I haven't actually been home. The longest time I've been, I try to go home like every Christmas, but it's usually, I don't typically get home in between that time, which is a little unfortunate. But we usually make some time to see each other elsewhere. And then the longest time I've been away, like from the United States, is when I go to Antarctica for about 3 months at a time. So yeah, there's definitely like some homesickness that can, especially like when I'm in Antarctica, and it's there's a lot of things that make it very lovely. Obviously, there's chefs that cook for us. You know, there's like, you can get like a variety of food, and we have a lot of like games, and like the people are just amazing. But you can get a little homesick, and I think, you know, there's definitely, it's more on the rarer side to do field work for that long, but it can get a little lonely in the loneliest continent.
Yeah.
But there's also like a great network of people, and like we have like good enough Wi-Fi to like stream TV shows. So you still feel like connected in a sense.
Sounds good. Thanks. All right. Our next question. Where in Alabama are you from?
Oh, I'm from Auburn, Alabama. So if anyone knows like Auburn University, that was my hometown.
Awesome. Outside of plankton, what's your favorite sea animal?
Dolphins. I love dolphins. They're like my first love. But penguins are up there. Like, same
How often do you see penguins when you're down there?
It depends. Sometimes like on the ship, or they don't usually come around station. Though I think that would be awesome. But on the ship, you can like kind of, if we're near the coast, you can like see them like swimming in the ocean, which is always super cool. Or they're every once in a while you'll get to go out with our birder people who like they see penguins on a daily basis. And if you get to go out with them, you're just like on an island full of penguins, and it's so awesome. It's like the best. It's always the best day when you get to hang out with the birders. But you know, if you're near land, you can probably spot a couple of them. But
Cool.
when we're like out at sea, it's usually much less common to see them.
Cool. So when you're on these boats, they're like, you are not the only scientist on the boat doing research. There are like a bunch of different scientists doing a bunch of different work. Is that how it works? Like, do you see scientists doing like deep sea stuff? Like, what else is going on that boat?
Yeah, so it's really cool. The program I'm a part of is the Palmer LTER. And you can look them up. They have a lot of cool resources. They also actually did some like Zoom calls from Antarctica with one of their outreach programs. So if people are more interested in specifically Antarctic stuff, I recommend looking them up. But yeah, we are really cool interdisciplinary. We do a lot of cool interdisciplinary work. So it's kind of like levels of the food web. So we have people on like the lowest level that study bacteria and like carbon and nitrogen specifically. They use a lot of like water samples to do that type of work. We have people who study phytoplankton, so these plant-like animals or plant-like organisms. Then there's us that do zooplankton. And then on the higher trophic level than us, we have the penguins and the whale people. That's typically what I find on one of my cruises, but the ship itself sees lots more than just our cruise. So I know like after us, there was people who did a lot of physical oceanography work. So studying kind of currents and the way water moves. And then there was actually a cool group of scientists that studied the bugs in Antarctica. Personally, that was the first time I heard there was bugs in Antarctica, but there are. So they did a lot of work. They like went to different islands trying to find these tiny little bugs. That was the first time I heard there was stuff like that. So that was really exciting to meet them and have like a conversation with them. There's lots of cool different work that it's really nice to be able to talk to all the scientists. We all we all live together, we all talk to each other. Especially on station, they made a point to do like weekly presentations on everyone's science. So it was really exciting to see what other people were doing at the same time. Like, you're so kind of hyper focused in your own world. It's really exciting to like kind of put the like whole environment together and see like what the rest of the environment is doing.
Very cool. Someone asked, I think they read your shirt. What is the Ocean Twilight Zone? Is that like a place in the ocean? Is that an organization? Is that both?
It's both. So this particularly, I think this is a brand from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute. It's up in Massachusetts. It's one of the oldest marine science institutions, I believe, in the world, but I think absolutely in the US. And they just had a cool shirt, and it has like a salp on the back. I don't know if you can see it very well.
Cool.
But these are some of the animals I study, and I've never seen a salp shirt before. So I had to get it. But also in general, I think this is a brand or something, but there is a zone in the ocean called the Ocean Twilight Zone. And it kind of goes like the layers of the ocean. There's lots of different classifications for it, but I think it's like the sunlit zone, and then the twilight zone, and then the midnight zone. And it's basically the animals, it kind of classifies some of the animals that you'll see. So like phytoplankton and zooplankton, because they have to eat the phytoplankton, typically spend their time in the upper ocean, this sunlit zone. And a lot of the most common animals, especially all mammals, because they have to breathe on the surface, they'll spend most of their time in that sunlit zone. But once you get kind of under that zone, into these twilight and midnight zones, you get these weird animals. They're really cool. Like there was a period of time no one knew what lived that deep, because how could something live underwater with that amount of pressure on them, but you get these really, and there's no light down there, so you get these really odd looking animals that have so like really crazy adaptations to be able to survive in that kind of environment. And yeah, if you ever like look up the zones of the ocean, it's like really cool to see animals you'll never see at the surface of the ocean. They're just like funky little fish or funky invertebrates that are like, how do you survive down there? That's wild.
It's so cool.
Yeah, I don't study deep sea stuff, but if there's something I love second to or after zooplankton, deep sea is so fascinating.
Deep sea is so cool.
Yeah,
and we're like able to see it so much better than we've ever been able to before. Like there's constantly
exactly
videos coming from the deep sea that we never would have gotten 20 years ago.
Especially if anyone's really curious, you can look up the Scripps Institute, or more likely their aquarium. Is it just called like the Scripps Aquarium?
It begins with an S. Oh my god, it'll come to me.
Monterey Bay Aquarium.
While you're answering a question, I'll figure it out.
I think it's the Monterey Bay Aquarium.
The Birch Aquarium. And then there's also the Monterey Bay Aquarium has a lot of good deep sea stuff.
Yeah, so in general, there's a lot of California aquariums that have a whole bunch of deep sea animals, because off of California you can get relatively very soon off the coast of California, it becomes really deep trenches, and so they can pick up a lot of these really cool deep sea creatures and actually have them displayed live. So if anyone's in California, highly recommend those aquariums, or you can just look them up online and you can see some of the like exhibits they have. Yeah, I actually was lucky enough to go there a couple months ago. It was so cool.
That's really fun. About 6-9 months ago, a new exhibit opened at the Monterey Bay Aquarium called Into the Deep, and they have like giant Japanese spider crabs and like all sorts of stuff that I've never seen in an aquarium before. Like really, like it's a constant rotation of deep sea animals depending on what they get, because I don't think they last all that long in the aquarium, depending on the animal. Some last like forever, but yeah, it was so cool. And it's also in English and Spanish, the whole exhibit, so it's like really it's like a really well done exhibit. You should check it out if you are out there. Okay, Garden Spot Middle School schooler Jasmine wants to know, are there any squids native to Antarctica? I did not plant this question.
That's a great question. I don't think so. I think some of the water is a little bit too cold for them, I believe, but also I don't do deep sea work, so I have no idea. My guess would be no, but you should look it up.
I can tell you for sure.
A really cool animal.
Yeah. So the biggest squid in the world is the colossal squid, and they are native to the Southern Ocean. So they're not in the shallow water. So you're not going to encounter them unless something has gone horribly wrong for that squid in where you are. But they're super deep. They are about the length of a school bus and like the thickness of a couch. They're like very chunky and big. They're about the same length as a giant squid, but they're just chunkier and like bulby looking. They're so cool. So they are they live in the Southern Ocean down there, and there are a bunch of squid that live deep in the Southern Ocean. I'm sure some live shallow too, but I'm most familiar with deep sea ones that live in the Southern Ocean that don't really go other places. Yeah, so the colossal squid is like the go-to Southern Ocean squid in my
okay. Oh, I need to keep that in mind. That's awesome.
You never know. Usually when people encounter colossal squid, it's because fisher people were fishing for Antarctic toothfish, which on a menu might be called Chilean sea bass. So when they're fishing for them, they'll like have this big fish on a fishing line, and the squid will see it and be like, my favorite lunch, and then grab the fish and then get pulled up to the surface accidentally. And so a lot of the sightings of those squid have been by accident, basically. Pretty wild. Okay. Last question. Let's see. I think zooplankton are, this is from Jasper. I think zooplankton are cool. Do you have any tips on how I can see them more frequently? I don't have a boat, but I do like slinging underwater lights over a boat dock.
Oh, That's great. There's a lot of zooplankton that could be attracted to those lights. I think my biggest recommendation is to get a pretty fine mesh net.
Yeah.
And kind of just start scooping. It might take you a couple of chances, but if you have to look really, really closely, and like once you bring the net up, and look really closely at any kind of movement, and that would probably be a zooplankton. You might find a lot of like larval. I don't know where you are, obviously, but you might find a lot of like larval fish, larval crabs, maybe larval clams. A lot of animals, their larval stages are actually zooplankton. So you might find tiny. They might look completely different from their grown version, but you might capture some of those larvae.
Cool. There are also, so we ran this school trip last week in Philadelphia, and there are these like little plastic clip-ons to phone cameras that you can use. They're like cheap. I think you can get them on Amazon for like $10. And so you can play around, dig around in wherever you are, whether that's a pond or a lake or a river or the ocean, wherever you are. And then drop some water just like on this, like looks like a little, that big suction cup kind of thing. And then your phone shows you. So you don't need a fancy microscope. You can get a cheap thing that clips onto your phone. It's awesome. They were really effective. We saw some copepods in the Schuylkill River. It was great.
Oh,
it was lovely. All right. So we are out of time. So we always ask everybody the same 2 questions at the end of every session. The first, if you had everyone's attention in the whole world and you could tell them one thing about your area of expertise, what would it be?
I had to think about this one. I said this question earlier, so I thought about it for a while, and I realized there's only one answer I could say. Poop is so important. So I don't know if I mentioned it a little bit, but I really study a lot of poop in my field, and this poop is so, particularly zooplankton poop. But I mean, other poop is probably important as well. But in terms for me, zooplankton poop is so important, and just keeping the environment as close to historically accurate as possible, even with humans changing a lot of things on Earth. With a lot of those changes, that's where some of these like real natural phenomenons came in place. And like the sinking of zooplankton poop is one of those things that are just crucial to the environment. I think it's from Hui. I've seen this quote once, and it was like, take a breath, think the ocean. Because every one of 2 breaths you take, some of that comes from plants, that like terrestrial plants, the trees, but also you have to think about the ocean, because the ocean is also very important to some of these like biological cycles, and that's more phytoplankton, but also zooplankton poop is so important. Sorry, I got, everything. The ocean is so important. That's all of it's so important. Got a little sidetracked there, but everything is just so important.
Amazing. Thank you. All right. Our next question. You still have everybody's attention in the world. You can tell them anything you want about anything. It can be significant and important, or it can be silly and fun. What do you tell them?
I would tell everyone that I think it's really important, especially for younger people, to hear that anyone could be a scientist. There's a lot of, like media attention on what like looks like a traditional scientist, what you have to be a traditional scientist. You can't be fun, you can't be funny, all of these things. But I think some of the best scientists have been like some of the funniest people I know, have been the most like the nicest people I know, someone who can like have a conversation that's not about science. And anyone can be a scientist. All you have to do is have a passion for something, and really, really be into it. And that's how I got here. I've been the only person in my classroom who's like really been into zooplankton. Everyone's like, what is that? And you just have to be really fascinated with something, and that passion can like hold you on forever. Because I talked about Antarctica, and that is the funnest part of my job. I really enjoy what I do. But also today, I have spent the entire time like answering emails and like studying for an exam. So there is more traditional schoolwork in grad school, and not all of it is the fun things you do every once in a while. But if you have that passion for what you do, be it science or anything else, I think that's the most important thing, to follow that as much as you can. But yeah, anyone can be a scientist. It's not like you have to be the smartest person in the world. I was like, okay, especially when I got to like high school biology, it was not my thing. Chemistry, absolutely not. And now my whole like dissertation is about like biology and chemistry. So you kind of just stumble your way somewhere, but I'm still really into it because I really love what I do. So I think that's always important to mention.
Amazing. I'm with you. Passion and persistence are more important than most things for being a scientist.
Being good at something,
Yeah.
like just keep at it and you'll figure out you're the best. Like you'll stumble your way. You're like, how am I the best in my field now? Oh no.
Yeah. Just happen. All right. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us? Anything you'd like to plug? Places we can find you on the internet? Anything like that?
No.
Great.
But I will say something. If there are any people who are super interested in marine science and happen to be Black, sorry, I don't know a lot of the resources, but there's definitely a lot of resources for affinity groups, for people who are interested in marine science. But particularly, I'm a member of Black in marine science and Black women and ecology, evolution, and marine science. It's a really wonderful group, and they're all lovely people, and it's great to have a little community. But I also recommend for anyone else, there's a whole bunch of affinity groups. So if just like look up like this in whatever and you'll find something.
Yes. Black in chemistry, Black in cancer, Black in whatever. There's so many amazing groups that are doing amazing work. Black in marine science and marine or minorities in shark science are two like big, really good ones in marine sciences. The Miss folks are also just what a funny bunch of gals. So much fun to hang out with. They're the best. And Black in marine science is doing like such amazing work and just killing it. It's been amazing.
It's amazing to watch.
Yeah, I've been following along. It's been so amazing. So impressive. Okay. We are over time, so I'm going to stop talking. But thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. Everybody at home, we will be talking about oceans again in a month, but this time we're going to be talking about warm oceans, coral reefs. Quite different from what we discussed today, even if it's both the ocean, but more than half of the world is the ocean, so it's okay to do it twice in a row. We will see you then. Thank you for coming, and thank you, Jasmine, for interpreting for us. We're grateful for you. All right. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you again.